Before the rumors rewrite history, and before silence fills the gaps with speculation, stop scrolling right now. What Xiao Zhan finally revealed about Wang Yibo is not what fans expected, and once you hear the story, you will question everything you thought you knew. Stay right here with Kdrama Drops, because this is the moment that changed everything behind the scenes and fans are still shocked by what truly happened. For years, their names were spoken together with admiration, curiosity, and endless debate. Every glance, every shared appearance, every quiet pause was analyzed by millions. But behind the polished smiles and controlled public moments, there was a story no one ever heard in full. Until now, Xiao Zhan never planned to speak about it. That much was clear from the way he hesitated before sharing his truth. This was not about stirring drama. This was about finally setting something straight that had followed him quietly for far too long. It all began during a period when schedules were overwhelming and expectations were crushing. The pressure to perform perfectly never eased, and the weight of public attention made every interaction feel heavier than it should have been. On the surface, everything looked smooth. Behind the scenes, it was far more complicated. According to Xiao Zhan, there was never a single explosive moment. No dramatic fallout. No sudden betrayal. What happened instead was a slow accumulation of misunderstandings, unspoken thoughts, and growing distance that no one addressed in time. There were moments when they stood side by side, smiling for cameras, while both carried questions they did not know how to ask. There were conversations that almost happened, words that stayed trapped behind careful expressions. Xiao Zhan admitted that he often chose silence, believing it was the respectful thing to do. He thought space would allow things to settle naturally. What he did not realize was that silence can be interpreted in many ways, and not all of them are kind. Wang Yibo, on the other hand, responded differently to pressure. He withdrew inward, focusing intensely on his work, believing professionalism meant keeping emotions firmly controlled. To him, restraint was strength. To Xiao Zhan, it sometimes felt like distance. Neither of them was wrong, but neither of them spoke. The turning point came during a quiet moment away from the spotlight. Not during filming, not during an event, but during a brief pause where the noise of the world faded and reality settled in. Xiao Zhan recalled standing there, realizing that whatever bond they once shared had become fragile, not because of conflict, but because of neglect. Not intentional neglect, but the kind that happens when people assume time will fix what only honesty can. I should have spoken sooner, Xiao Zhan admitted. I thought understanding would happen without words. I was wrong. That realization stayed with him long after the moment passed. Fans noticed subtle changes before any statement was ever made. Interactions became more formal. The warmth people remembered seemed quieter, more restrained. Speculation grew, filling the silence with countless theories. But the truth was far simpler and far more human. There was no rivalry, no resentment, just two individuals navigating immense pressure without the tools to communicate openly in the moment. When Xiao Zhan finally chose to reveal what happened, it was not to assign blame. It was to acknowledge responsibility. He spoke about the importance of speaking honestly, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when the risk of misunderstanding feels high. He also made it clear that respect never disappeared. Despite the distance, there was always acknowledgement of shared history and mutual effort. What changed was not the respect, but the closeness. And sometimes, closeness cannot survive silence. Wang Yibo has not publicly contradicted Xiao Zhan's account. Those close to him say he understands it now in ways he could not before. Time has offered perspective that pressure once denied them both. This story does not end with reconciliation or a dramatic reunion. It ends with understanding. Xiao Zhan's revelation was not meant to reopen old chapters. It was meant to close them with clarity rather than speculation. To remind fans that even the strongest connections require communication to survive. And perhaps that is why fans are still shocked. Not because of scandal, but because the truth was quieter than expected. After Xiao Zhan shared his truth, the reaction was not immediate chaos. It was something deeper and far more lasting. Silence spread first, not the awkward kind, but the kind where people paused to reconsider everything they thought they understood. Behind the scenes, Xiao Zhan felt a weight lift that he had carried for years. Speaking was never easy for him. He had always believed that actions mattered more than words. But this time, words were necessary. Without them, the story would continue to be rewritten by others. What many did not realize was that his revelation was not about the past alone. It was about accountability, about acknowledging how two people can care deeply yet still drift apart when communication fails. After the truth came out, memories resurfaced for both of them. Xiao Zhan recalled moments when Wang Yibo stood beside him in silence, moments that once felt comfortable but later felt uncertain. At the time, he believed that mutual understanding existed without explanation. Now he understood that assumptions can quietly erode even the strongest bonds. Wang Yibo, according to those close to him, processed the revelation privately. He was not someone who reacted publicly or emotionally. Instead, he reflected. He thought about how his instinct to retreat inward during pressure may have appeared distant, how a professionalism might have been mistaken for detachment. Neither had intended harm. Time passed, and with it came a subtle shift. At industry events, their interactions remained respectful, calm, polite, but there was something new beneath the surface. Not tension, not regret, understanding. There was a moment that fans almost missed. A brief exchange backstage. A nod. A shared glance that lasted just long enough to acknowledge the truth without reopening old wounds. No cameras caught it clearly. No statements followed. But those who witnessed it said it felt like closure. Not reconciliation. Closure. Xiao Zhan later reflected that closure does not always mean returning to what once was. Sometimes it means accepting that something meaningful existed and allowing it to remain in the past without bitterness. He emphasized that respect had never disappeared, that admiration for Wang Yibo's dedication and talent had always remained intact. What changed was the space between them, shaped not by conflict but by silence that lingered too long. Fans continued to debate. Some hoped for renewed closeness. Others accepted the reality with maturity. But what mattered most was that the narrative finally belonged to the people who lived it. This was not a story of rivalry. It was not a story of betrayal. It was a story of timing, of two individuals growing under immense pressure without the tools to communicate openly when it mattered most, of silence mistaken for strength, of distance created unintentionally, and of the courage it takes to finally speak. Xiao Zhan made it clear that he did not expect understanding from everyone. He only wanted honesty to exist where speculation once lived. He wanted fans to see the humanity behind the headlines. As time moved forward, both continued on their separate paths, focused on their work, their growth, and their futures. The chapter they shared remained part of their history, not erased, not rewritten, but understood. Some connections are not meant to last forever. Some are meant to shape you, teach you, and then quietly let you go. And that is where this story truly ends. Not with shock, not with drama, but with clarity. If part 1 made you question what you thought you knew, and part 2 helped you understand what silence can do, then this story has served its purpose. Because the most powerful truths are not always loud. Sometimes they are simply spoken at last. Stay with Kdrama drops for more stories that live beneath the surface, where real emotions exist beyond speculation, and where the quiet truth finally finds its voice.